On June 25, 2023, around 11:30 a.m., the roller coaster Jetline at Grona Lund was operating normally. A train loaded with 11 riders was dispatched from the station. Riders who had been on the ride before thought the ride was running a little rougher than usual. As the train descended a sweeping curve between brake 1 and 2, a control arm, a metal device connecting two wheel assemblies on the front of the train, failed. This caused the front car to sag downwards, making contact with the track at several points. Each time the underside of the train contacted the track, there were large jolts that threw riders forward and into their lap bars. This caused 3 riders to be flung from the train. The train stalled out in the following turn due to the loss of speed. 3 riders were seriously injured and 1 was killed. The investigation into the accident began immediately. The investigation would be headed by the Swedish Accident Investigation Authority, who had experience investigating other ride accidents in the country. They would examine every aspect of the ride, from its core design, its maintenance, operations, and the design of several of the ride's systems. Jetline had been operating since 1988 without any serious incidents. The ride was made by the defunct German manufacturer Schwarzkopf. The trains were made by Zire. The ride featured 5 trains, with 3 being used at a time. Train E was involved in the accident. Investigators started by examining the accident site itself. They found that there were several impact sites located on the track where the underside of the train had made contact, leaving large gashes in the thick steel. There was also extensive damage to Train E itself. This not only included the expected damage where the train had made contact with the track, but also extensive damage to the couplings between cars, as well as extensive bending of the ride's lap bars, with all but one of the ride's lap bars where riders had been seated found to be bent forward out of their normal position. Some of these lap bars were bent so far that they were nearly in the same position as they would be if they were completely open. They also noted damage to a roof and a section of the ride caused by wheel bogies from the train hitting them. Clearly, the ride had suffered a serious and catastrophic failure. To learn more, the investigators looked closer at the design of the ride. Jetline, like most roller coasters, used a wheel bogie design consisting of 3 sets of wheels that effectively secured the train to the track. These bogies came in pairs and were held together with a device known as a control arm. The control arm acted like a bridge between the 2 wheel bogies, holding them together and connecting them to the train itself. Each car on Jetline featured 2 wheel bogies and 1 control arm, with the exception of Car 1, which had 4 wheel bogies and 2 control arms. Looking at the accident site, the front control arm on Car 1 was almost entirely missing. Only a small section, which was attached directly to the rest of the car, remained. Examining the area around the crash site, investigators were able to find the right part of the control arm on the ground under brake 1. A short ways down the track, near where the train descended from brake 1, the left part of the control arm was found. This area coincided with a large gash on the track and the area where 1 rider was thrown out and killed. The control arms were examined closer to determine why it had failed in such a dramatic way. Jetline maintenance records showed that cracks had been noticed in the ride's front control arms several times in the past, with the first report coming from 2006. These cracks had been mostly remedied by certified welders repairing them. During an annual teardown of one of Jetline's trains in 2019, cracks were once again noticed in a front control arm. The maintenance team noted that the general wear on the control arm was too great to repair, and so a new control arm was needed. Grona Lund placed an order for 5 front control arms, enough to replace the arm on all trains, with the contractor Mekasmos in November 2019. With this order, they sent the original drawings for the control arms provided by Schwarzkopf. Other than stating the number of arms that they wanted produced, the grade of the steel to be used, and sending the drawings, there was no other information provided in their order regarding how the control arms were to be manufactured. Mekasmos, a larger metalworking firm in Sweden, did not perform welding themselves, and so they contracted the work out to another firm, GmbH. Grona Lund was never informed that a new subcontractor had been hired for the job. A welder at GmbH started work on the control arms, but had questions regarding how the job was to be done. They were unsure of what type of weld was to be done, as well as if the design included a backing bar, which is a steel plate that sat inside the empty space at the point where the control arm angled downwards. As they were not direct contractors for Grona Lund, they did not have a way to reach out with any questions. Instead, they interpreted the over 30-year-old document the best that they could and determined that a backing bar was not part of the design. They produced the control arms and sent them to Grona Lund, with them arriving in spring 2020 in conjunction with the pandemic. The 5 arms were inspected, and it was noticed that one of them had a significant gash created during its construction. This control arm was marked for scrap. Meanwhile, the control arm found to be in too poor of condition to continue operating was replaced by one from a non-operating train from 1988. The ride would not be cycled again until 2022 due to the pandemic. On August 28, 2022, it was noticed that one car in Train E was out of alignment with the others on the track. The ride was immediately closed and a large crack was found in one of the rear control arms. Grona Lund immediately took the entire ride out of service and inspected all control arms on every train. 2 additional small cracks were found on rear control arms on trains C and D. Ever since cracks had first been noticed on the ride, Grona Lund had been working with a third-party inspection company called Dekra on what to do about them. They reached out to them once again after discovering these significant cracks. Dekra recommended welding repairs to the control arms that Grona Lund then followed. Grona Lund also ordered new rear control arms for all trains. All the weld-repaired control arms were inspected using non-destructive testing and were found to be properly repaired and in good shape. While replacement arms were being fabricated, Train E was taken out of service. The order for these control arms once again went to Mecosmos, who once again contracted the work out to GMW. GMW did not have the capacity to complete the work, and so they once again contracted the work to another subcontractor. These new rear control arms were delivered to Grona Lund in March 2023, and an initial inspection showed many problems, including poor quality welds and incorrect dimensions. These were to be sent back. At the time of the accident, none of the new rear control arms were installed, though this entire event underscores the quality problems of producing parts for a ride whose manufacturer had been out of business for several decades. These issues were being exacerbated by contractors subcontracting work to other firms, making communication between those involved nearly impossible and decreasing quality. The newly fabricated front control arms from the 2019 order would be installed on Train B in 2022 and Train E in March 2023. Train E's would end up failing catastrophically during the accident due to several manufacturing errors, including poor weld quality and the lack of a backing bar at the point where the control arm bent. Having uncovered the root cause of the accident, investigators dove further into what had actually caused serious injuries and a death: the failure of the ride's restraints to secure riders. Of the 11 riders on Train E during the accident, 10 were injured in some way and 1 was killed. 3 riders were ejected from the train due to the sudden and hard jolts as the train slammed into the track. 1 ejected rider was killed, another suffered serious injuries, and another suffered only minor injuries. Riders on the train suffered both serious and minor injuries caused by their lap bars being driven into their hips. This also caused serious deformation to several of the ride's lap bars, that in some cases caused them to bend to the point of essentially being open. Investigators tested the lap bars to see how much force it would take to bend them. Their testing revealed that at around 140 kilograms or 308 pounds of force, the lap bars would permanently start to bend. The bars would also bend elastically, returning to their original shape at much lower forces. The bending was seen most where the tube of the lap bar transitioned into an angled section of sheet metal. Cycling the ride with test dummies revealed that under normal conditions, the lap bars would only see at most around 31.3 kilograms or about 70 pounds of force. This testing also showed that the ride was experiencing close to its maximum G-forces at the point where the control arm failed, about 4.7. With this information uncovered, we can reconstruct the events of the accident. On June 25, 2023, Jetline was operating normally. Train E was loaded with 11 riders and dispatched out of the station. The train climbed the 32-meter or 105-foot lift hill and dropped into the layout. A rougher ride was noticed by some experienced riders as the front control arm on the train began to fail. As the train descended from brake 1 and was subjected to the ride's maximum downward forces of 4.7 Gs, the improperly manufactured control arm bent significantly, causing the right side of the front control arm to break off along with the wheel bogie. This allowed car 1 to sag down further, making hard contact with the track. This caused a powerful and sudden jolt that shook the entire track structure. The sudden jerk forced riders hard into their lap bars, causing all but one lap bar to bend forward and causing the lap bar restraining a rider on the right side of car 4 to bend so much that it was unable to restrain the rider under it. This caused the rider to be ejected and to fall to the ground where they were killed. The train continued, still with great momentum, through the next section of track. Here, the remaining left side of the front control arm and bogie detached, allowing the car to sag even further down into the track. The train continued to be jolted as it made contact with the track. As the train descended another downward right turn, it contacted the track hard once again, shaking the structure and again pressing riders into their lap bars with an immense amount of force. During this event, 2 more riders were thrown from the train, with one being seriously injured. The train continued for several more meters before stalling due to the loss of energy and rolling backwards into a low point on the track. In total, 6 riders were injured, with 3 being seriously injured and 1 being killed. The investigation would uncover many interesting findings that are still being digested by the industry today. Grona Lund had done practically everything correctly according to the existing set of rules. They had completed regular maintenance of Jetline, including full teardowns and non-destructive testing. They had commissioned replacement parts that were in theory built to the same standards as the originals, and they had even done a reasonable amount of work to ensure that the replacement parts were up to the same quality standards as the original, even rejecting several control arms provided to them for lack of quality. Yet this accident still occurred. This prompted the investigative body to make several recommendations to both Grona Lund and the amusement ride industry as a whole. Grona Lund has since implemented the following changes. Implementation of a new verification plan that tracks the production of new parts for rides without manufacturer support during every step of the process. An updated ordering procedure that allows for more communication with contractors. Increased documentation of the installation of new parts. An updated order form that lays out industry standards governing the creation of new parts to suppliers, enhanced verification of suppliers, updates to the park's existing risk assessment program that now takes into account a ride's age and operating time, and other changes. Several changes were also recommended for all operators worldwide by IAAPA, the global organization for the attractions industry. This includes a recommendation for parks to fund travel of managers to visit suppliers' factories and ensure that parts are being made properly, encouraging transparency and communication between suppliers and parks, and ensuring that suppliers are properly equipped to handle the production of parts. Additionally, over 100 IAAPA members attended a case study review of the accident. Grona Lund and the Swedish Accident Investigation Authority have been and continue to be extremely transparent in providing details about this accident. Additionally, the Investigation Authority also recommended IAAPA and its members consider if ride restraints should be designed to restrain riders during extremely unlikely situations like those that occurred in the accident, where riders suddenly put much more force on their restraints than they ever would during a normal ride cycle. Generally, restraints are designed for foreseeable abnormal conditions, like emergency stops in brake sections, but no industry standards or even best practices currently exist for determining how or if restraints should be designed for catastrophic failures like those seen in this accident. The industry has yet to respond, at least publicly, to this idea, and it will be interesting to check back in a few years to see if this is a direction that the industry moves towards. To conclude, this accident was one of the most interesting in recent times. Grona Lund did essentially everything right with regards to following their own established rules and industry standards, yet this accident occurred. It will be very interesting to see how this accident shapes future standards and policies across not just Sweden, but the entire world. Sweden, for their part, is incredibly good, not just at investigating accidents properly, but also being very transparent in releasing all of their findings to anyone who is interested. This is something their European neighbors could learn a lot from, as most European countries rarely release accident reports to the public. If you would like to read more on this accident, as there were some details I simply could not fit into this video, feel free to read the full accident report linked in the description. As always, if you enjoy the factual way that I cover these accidents, please like and subscribe so that these videos fare better with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.